after here in New York City, when the energy changed, particularly, unfortunately, where Asian Americans were concerned, I remember the first time I was on the street of the subway and then someone looked at you a little bit too long, and then the first time you thought, well, maybe that was in my head. But unfortunately, those problems only got worse and worse over time, eventually manifesting in acts of violence against our elders, people being shoved to the ground and brutally beaten for no other reason than the fact that they are Asian. And that has to stop here in New York City. There are so many things we have to do better. I love the idea of a New York City diversity project, and we're going to make that happen under my administration. We have to let New Yorkers know that Asian Americans contribute at every level of the city. And I have to say, it's going to be pretty hard to ignore when we have the first Asian American mayor in the history of New York. Am I right? Yeah! There is so much work for us to do. We're going to be visiting a number of small businesses. If you look at the small business communities in Asian American neighborhoods, they have been hit even harder than in other parts of New York City. And we all know that part of that is economic, part of that is the fact that we're missing all the tourists, but part of that is the fact that some New Yorkers have been avoiding Asian neighborhoods for a variety of reasons, and we have to turn that around. We have to let people know that this city is welcome to everyone and that everyone should be visiting every community, especially Asian communities, in this time when so many of their small businesses are hurting. The overriding principle of my administration is going to be fairness. We are going to treat New Yorkers fairly and not have certain communities feel like they are being neglected or overlooked. And I will say that I think that fairness would actually be a massive improvement for many communities, including the Asian American community here in New York. That if you look at the level of visibility and public support around incidents like the anti-Asian violence, we don't think that Asian Americans have actually been treated fairly in many, many respects. One thing that I'm calling for that I think most people would agree with, we should be fully funding the Asian Hate Crimes Task Force in the NYPD. This is not a phenomenon that is responded to by volunteers. You need people who are dedicated to it. And when I've spoken to people who have been victims of anti-Asian incidents, we know that many of these incidents are never reported. I know this because I've spoken to victims themselves. One woman who's been punched in the face multiple times and has never reported them. Do you all know people that have had experience that have not reported it?